This podcast is intended for mature audiences and could be triggering to some. Please use discretion when listening. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Hearts with Jules, a podcast where survivors can share their story. I'd like to introduce you to our guest today. Her name is Cindy. Cindy is a survivor of narcissistic abuse, and today she'll be sharing her story. Thank you, Cindy, for meeting with me today. How are you? And could you tell us more about yourself and your situation?
Yes. My name is, again, Cindy, and I'm a mom of 7. And for the longest time, I got into a lot of situations where it didn't serve me well at all. And I'm now in a position in my life where I'm thriving in a healthy environment, a healthy relationship, and, growing 7 beautiful children as well. I am currently a financial broker, as well as I own a beauty bar in Vaughan. So I'm actually really excited. I'm starting my own businesses now. And, I don't think I'd be where I am if it wasn't for the situation I was in. Because it's kind of like a blessing in disguise.
Right.
You don't understand your worth until you hit rock bottom. Right. And that's what it was for me. I remember it as clear as day. And I don't know if it's my PTSD, but it still makes me cry. You know what I mean? At the fact that I was even in that situation. But it motivates me to kind of share my story because it's not something I want anybody to ever experience. And that's why I'm super grateful that I have an opportunity to kind of share my story in your podcast.
Oh my God. Thank you. No, thank you. Because if it wasn't for you, I don't think this would even happen as well. So I do appreciate you coming forward and sharing your story.
It's a hard truth. And the thing is, like, we don't understand what we're in until we're out.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
And it's so hard to understand what you're in if you don't really have a support, right? Like,
yep.
You have it, but you're not listening to them regardless. And it really comes down to how you feel and think about yourself, setting boundaries. But sometimes those boundaries can get lost when you're with somebody you think you love. Right?
Exactly, because you're stuck in this trauma bond, right?
Yes, exactly. And honestly, I never knew like any of these terminologies. And I'm just like, oh my God, yeah, that's what I was dealing with. Oh my God, yeah, that's right. And like when I got out of the situation, it was so crazy because it's like, wow, I never understood that there was this cycle that I was dealing with myself. Right. So a little bit about my story. So it wasn't just one abusive relationship. It was kind of like a compile of relationships, right? I had my firstborn with someone who, I was kind of like a runaway child. And then I obviously got into relationships where I thought this person was there to protect me, like he was my hero, took me out of my situation at home. And it turns out that he was actually a worse situation. No. And I had my firstborn, and if it wasn't for my son, to be honest, I wouldn't have learned to fall back. In that relationship, I was kind of just taking it as it goes, right? Like every time I complained, the abuse was hitting, right? And it was just like I never understood my worth. And when it wasn't until I had my firstborn that I was like, no, like I can't have him in this environment. Right. But in that relationship, it was like I was so young, and it was like the only thing that I knew, right? And you grow up in a society or a culture or like a family environment where it's like, no, you have to stay with the person you're having kids with. Like that was my mindset. And I was like, oh my God. And this is things that I experienced growing up. Like I've seen, my dad do this with my mom, not as severe as what I experienced, but there was some sort of abuse that was happening, and it was very toxic in that house. And I don't blame my parents because obviously it was their culture back at home too, right? And it just seemed like a normal thing. So I got into this relationship thinking this was normal, and then I got pregnant, and I was like, oh my God, now I have to stay with this person because I've already put shame on my family having a child before marriage. Or I was giving my family a lot of hell, so they were definitely not the type of people that I wanted to run to when I first found out I was pregnant. So I did stick around even longer. And you just get comfortable in that identity, right?
Mm-hmm.
I developed this identity with myself.
Right.
But it wasn't until I got pregnant that I was just like, okay, no, like I can't have this for my son. I can't have this for my baby. And that's when I started fighting back.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started fighting back, that's when things started to really, really fall apart between us. And it's crazy because he ended up cheating on me with somebody who I consider now is my soul sister. And we're actually
What?
running a business together.
Oh my.
There was a long, yeah, there's just a huge story in between there too. But, you know, I'm glad for that relationship because I gained a soul sister out of that. And I gained, you know, my son gained 2 new sisters out of that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So although it was hard for me to even understand what was going on, I did, you know, that's where my strength started to come in. And then I started dating another person. And in the beginning, it was, you know, loyalty. And we were all like, you know, and again, I was still young. I was a single mom now. And this relationship was the one that really, really broke me, right? It broke my spirit completely. I was with this person for almost 6 years, and we had 3 kids together. And he was helping me raise my firstborn.
Right.
You know, I thought, yeah, this is a great relationship in the beginning. Like we love each other. It's like a ride or die type of situation. And then we had kid after kid after kid. I'm like, oh yeah, like this is it now. I cannot leave this person. Right. This is my
Right.
second baby father. I cannot leave this person.
Right.
I had this mindset that I cared so much about my reputation that I didn't realize that I was being in another toxic relationship. I didn't even understand my boundaries. Like I didn't even know what boundaries were. I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
what self-love was. I just knew that I loved my kids. And if staying with their father was going to make us a family, then that's what I needed to do. And in our relationship, there was so much things that were going on. There was obviously substance abuse in the mix. It just got worse. And it really got worse. And when I had my 4th child, I couldn't take it anymore. Like he never ever physically hurt me until the last year of our relationship, or last couple of years of our relationship. And it was this constant struggle where he was always accusing me of cheating on him. And it was crazy because how could I was literally going to school, coming home, going to work, coming home. There was no in between. And he made the environment so hard for me to even think outside of our relationship. Like I came home and I have to make sure that he understood and knew that I was in school. I would be in school and I would have to FaceTime him just so that he knows that I'm in school. That was like the first, 4 years of a relationship. That's just who he was. And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh yeah, this man loves me because he's just so overprotective, right? And he made that, a thing. And like I remember even going to college for the first time. I was so excited and I met college friends, like, and
Mm-hmm.
one of them was a guy, obviously. Like we had this little group and he came after him. He found his number. He called him and was like, hey, stay away from our girl. How embarrassed was I the next day when I found out that happened?
Wow. It's very insecure and like maybe trust issues from a previous relationship, maybe.
Yeah. And I knew that. And again, that's what I knew, right? I'm an empath. So it's like I was seeing this person that was hurt and I was going to be like that savior.
Yes, I'm gonna
But
fix you.
right, I'm gonna fix you because yeah, like, oh no, I understand where you're coming from, or I understand your insecurities. Like, oh no, I totally get it. Okay, I get it. Like it was that kind of mindset that I had in my mind. And the fact that we had kids, it was like, okay, I have to understand him. I have to understand him. And it was that kind of tone. Like, okay, so if I go to school, I have to make sure I FaceTime him. I have to make sure I call him after my class to make sure that he knows that I just got out of class. And I have to tell him when I'm coming home, what bus I'm taking. And it was just that. So how could I possibly have the time in my brain to even have a moment to even cheat? You know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Yeah,
and
for
and
sure.
then every single time he would tell me that, oh, I bet you were this guy, or I bet you were that guy, it was like a slap across my face because
Hmm.
here I am every single day thinking about you and what's going to make you happy. And yeah, that was just the environment that I was in for like the first, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. And it wasn't until I had my fourth daughter that I was so done with it. And I think he started to realize that. There were times I went to school with a black eye, and I became suicidal. That relationship really broke me. Like, how can anybody survive in that environment? How can anybody thrive in that environment? And then I remember he got really bad after I gave birth to my fourth child. Mind you, every single time I was pregnant, I bet you that's not my kid. Like,
Oh my
literally.
goodness. That's
Um,
very toxic. I'm so sorry you had to go through that.
yeah, and I felt more sorry for my kids, right? But again, I had this mindset like I have to stay with him.
I totally get it. My culture is like that too. I was raised that way as well.
And it's crazy because it was like nobody even knew what I was going through. Like, I can talk to my closest friends, they had no idea. The only ones that did know was like the ones that I went to school with and they saw the black eye, or the ones that have actually experienced him, like calling them. Luckily, they understood my situation. I'm still really good friends with these people. I was just so embarrassing, you know what I mean? And I started to isolate myself, and I just didn't want to tell anybody my problems because, like, you don't want to hear it. You don't want to hear your friends telling you just leave him. You don't want to hear it because you leaving him would be like you failing, right? That
Right.
was my mindset. I felt like I was going to fail my children for not being strong enough to deal with this person,
Right.
because that mindset of I have to be with the father of my kids was just daunting on me, like day in and day out. And I was just like, man, like, it was crazy. Like, it
Right.
got really bad to the point where I was kind of like in and out of shelters just before I gave birth to my fourth child. And then even after, I remember 2 weeks after I gave birth, this is the first time my mom actually came to my rescue and called the cops and, tried to lay charges on him. He came and he was just acting crazy again, accusing me of this and that. And I was breastfeeding my daughter and he punched me on my arm. And mind you, I was just like mommy mode. You know what I mean? Like, how dare you do that while I'm breastfeeding my newborn? And I'll tell you, Jules, I blanked out. I put my baby down and I told my oldest son to take the rest of his siblings, who were toddlers, mind you, put them in a room. And I became this abusive person. Like, I became what he, like, I just felt like a monster after, and I blanked out. We got physical, really, really physical. I actually really fought back. I was like literally screaming for help as if I was dying. And finally, um, my landlord upstairs was like, "Hey guys, what's going on?" And that's when he stopped, and that's when I stopped. Like, I honestly, I don't even really remember because I was so blacked out. Like, my mind just blacked out. I just went into like mommy fierce mode, and
Hmm.
I don't even know what happened, but I just remembered putting my daughter down, telling my oldest son to get the kids in the room, put on the TV, like blasting high. After that, my mom finally came, and she brought me to her house, and we packed up all my kids, all four of them, and we went to my mom's house, and she called the cops. And this is like, it is crazy because even after all of this, I still gave him another chance. You know, it was crazy. I know, right? Because he was on substances and he was kind of getting off of it. And because I know that situation, it was kind of like, okay, that wasn't you. That wasn't you. That was in my head. It's not you. It's not you. Right. And I think the main reason why I took him back, because I had a fear of being a single mom of four,
Hmm.
having that reputation of being a single mom of four. I don't know how
Yeah.
it is to be a single mom of four. I've never witnessed anybody around me being a single mom of four. I get the whole single mom of one, but single mom of four, that was more scary to me than he was. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so
That's
yeah,
that's a that's a lot of work. And again, like going back on culture too, like you always want that father figure kind of thing for the kids as
yeah,
well.
exactly. Like, how could I strip that away from them, right?
Right.
And so yeah, I took him back after that. I didn't press any charges, but I remember I was so bruised. Like, the cops, I didn't want to leave a statement. I was like kind of mad that my mom even called the cops. But he came and he saw like I had like a black eye, and I didn't even know I had a black eye. That's how much I blacked out on
Yeah.
that event. But I knew that moment was like, I cannot live my life like this. And I knew it. I had to change something. I just didn't know what I could change. And then I became even more depressed, and I developed anxiety, and I just didn't want to leave anymore.
Mhm.
And then there was this one time, this is in November, and I remember November 11th, 2013. My daughter was born 2013 of August. And November 11th, I remember I came home from school, and my son told, I think, one of his siblings that he had a dream about some black shadow or some guy chasing him in his dream, right? My son used to get night terrors, and I'm starting to, I realized why. And then of course what he did was he was probing my son all these questions. My son at that time didn't know his biological father. He just knew that my current partner was his dad. But my partner at that time was always thinking that I was secretly seeing this person, seeing my ex, and he was probing questions for my kid, right?
Right.
And I'm like, what the heck is going on? So I came home, and right away he tells me like, oh, this is what my son said. And then he's accusing me all of a sudden of seeing some other guy. So then we went at it verbally. He was asking to see my phone, and then he broke my phone, and he told me to come to the basement where we were staying at his parents' house. And I just remember he was just asking me like, are you seeing this person? I kept saying no. Like I kept saying no. I'm not, like, I could have said yes, but I didn't want to lie to myself, and my kids were around. Like I didn't want them to ever know or even have an idea that I was that type of person. You know what I mean?
Right.
I fought so hard for the truth that why am I going to lie just to satisfy this person, right?
Right.
So here's me, the Cindy's kind of coming back, right? The strength in me is coming back, and I'm just like, I was at that point, I was even getting fed up with it. He just kept getting irritated at the fact that I said, no, I'm not seeing anybody. No, I'm not seeing anybody. No, I'm not seeing anybody. No, I'm not seeing this person. He kept saying, tell me the truth right now, or I'm going to smack you with this. And he had like a stick, and I kept saying no, like no. And I knew that moment. I knew at that moment, Jules, I was just like, all right, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die an honest woman, 100%. And yeah, and he broke the stick in half, and he kept saying, tell me the truth. And I said, I am not sleeping with anybody. I don't have the time to. I'm the only one making income for us. I'm the only one going to school, and I have 4 children plus a newborn that I have to take care of. Where do I have the time? And like the moment I said that, he like smacked me with the stick.
You literally don't have the time. I don't know where he's getting this idea from. That's
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know.
wow.
It was kind of like a blackout moment, and we were just at it, and I had 3 of my kids in there. I had my third born hiding behind this little bar that we had, playing with his toys. I had my baby in her car seat. I could tell you, I came home from school around 3 o'clock, and this event didn't stop till like his parents came home around, I don't know, maybe 10, 11. But he kept smacking me. He kept hitting me with a stick. He kept asking me these exact same questions over and over again. Like I honestly wanted to die at that moment. Sorry, I'm like crying.
I'm so sorry. You don't even deserve this. You
You
still get triggered, eh?
I do. I
Yeah.
do.
And that's totally normal.
Yeah, and and I've grown accustomed, not like accustomed to it, but it's like it every time I think about it, it just drives me to make sure like my kids are never in that situation, right?
Mhm.
It's that constant reminder that says, like, first of all, pat in the back for myself for even getting out of that, and even surviving that. But
Right.
I just like it will always be a trigger. Like trauma, it's trauma, right?
It is, yes.
It happened like the what my first ex did, that was me just that I could handle those thoughts. I would never cry, but this was trauma to me. And it was trauma because there was this one moment, my firstborn daughter came up to us and was like, hey, mommy, are you okay? right? And she didn't really know how to talk. So she was kind of like, mommy, okay, okay, right?
Mhm.
And I said, yes, baby, don't worry. Me and your daddy are just playing. At that moment, I looked at her dead in the eye and I was kind of saying, hey, this is how moms and dads act about it. Like I painted this picture for her, like this is normal. And
Right.
at that moment, it was heartbreaking for me because it's not normal. And
Right.
I can't believe that's what I showed her. That's what I was showing my kids. And that it wasn't the sticks that were, it wasn't the fact that I was getting hit by sticks that was traumatizing. It was the fact that I looked my daughter dead in the eye, and that's the reason why I cry every time I think about it, because it's the look in her eye that was so traumatic to me, because she was so young, she didn't understand, and I put her in that situation to think like this is what love looks like. I pictured her in the same position I was in at that very moment, and that was the the memory that stayed with me.
But you didn't know that at the time because at the time you were protecting her.
I thought I was protecting her from this image of her dad being such a bad person.
Right.
Because again, the empath in me was like, I don't want my kids to know that their mom or dad were bad people,
Mhm.
right? It was that moment that I cry about it every single time, because I regret it. I do regret that moment for her. It wasn't getting beat up. It wasn't getting the sticks. That's something that I dealt with for so long. That was nothing new to me, right? But
Right.
it was that moment that I led my daughter to believe this was normal. And I felt so guilty. I felt like the worst mom on the planet.
It's not your fault though. It's not your fault. And when you're in the moment, like you really don't recognize these things until after the fact.
Yeah. And it took a lot. It took a lot for me to understand, because after all that, I just remember, I literally remember, Jules, he was hitting me so much over and over again. I just didn't want to respond anymore. And I just like, I don't know what you want me to say. And he just kept saying, say it, like say you're sleeping with somebody else and all that stuff. And I didn't. And I kept getting hit and I kept getting hit. And I remember like the stick hitting my leather jacket. I remember what I was wearing that day. I was wearing a leather jacket and he just kept hitting it. I remember I literally prayed to God that day, and I was like, listen, if I get out of this place alive, like I will do more good. Like I will do more good. Just please let me live.
Right.
And mind you, I was suicidal, right? I didn't want to live. And for some strange reason, this is like I wanted to live. After I saw my daughter, I'm like, no, I gotta make it up to her. Like I can't, if I die, I can't have this as her last image. You know what I mean?
Right.
And for some reason, my body just went numb. I couldn't even feel the abuse anymore. I couldn't feel the sticks anymore. And the whole like the fire started to die down, all the adrenaline started to die down, and I was just literally taking beatings, and my body was just so numb. It was just so numb. And I didn't even realize how much time passed by, and that's when his parents were like, what's going on? Like they finally came downstairs and took me away. And I wanted to run to the police, and I was literally in so much shock, Jules. Like I don't even know, it's such a blur to me that I don't even know how I got out of that situation. Like that's how much I was in shock. Because of the prior incident, Children's Aid was involved, and they didn't know about it because I kept my mouth shut.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until the next day I literally told my mom. He was sleeping. I packed up the kids and I'm like, I need you to pick me up. I'm never coming back here. And I left that house. I had my own place at the time, and I just stayed there. And I told my mom, like, I need to leave here because he knows where I live. Long story short, there, like, I ended up moving out with my mom and all that stuff. But in that whole, and I was trying to get away from him. I was trying to get away from him. And I'm just like, I can't, he was doing his best to get me back, Jules. Like, it was crazy. He was stalking me. He was
Mhm.
trying to follow me. And then I was like at the point where I didn't know what to do with the kids either. Right. Do I let this person stay? Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Um, I was just so confused. I was just so confused. And I'm actually really glad he did this, because Children's Aid was involved at this time. And he told our worker that his daughter, my daughter, told him that a guy punched her. But it was kind of like he was probing her to say things to make him give her things she wanted. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, oh, tell me that, mommy this, mommy that, and I'll buy you this, kind of like that. And mind you, she's like 3, 4 years old. Now that I think of it, it's just like I just want to punch him every time. But, like, you see it. Like,
No,
go
I
ahead.
get it. You have like a lot, like honestly, like you've been putting up with it for so many years. You have all this anger built up. You've been putting up with it. You've stayed silent just to protect this image this whole time. Um, you have a lot of buildup. So I know I totally understand where you're coming from. Like, especially that buildup feeling that you have in there. For you to feel that anger, it's totally normal. But eventually it just goes away.
I only get angry when I think about it because it's like my poor kids, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Like I'm
No,
angry for them, but they don't know anything, but I'm just angry for them,
right.
right? And then I'm angry that I even allowed myself to get like so far into this. And I'm just glad like he actually told that to Children's Aid. And of course my worker came knocking out my door. I was like, hey, I have to make sure like the kids are okay. And I'm like, yeah, they're fine. Like, why aren't they fine? Like,
Hmm.
And she's like, oh, well, this is what the claim is with this person. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, you already know the situation. I'm like, no matter what, he's always going to think like that. And the fact that he's allowing my children to be part of this again, like it's crazy. And that's when I broke down. That's when I broke down to her. And I told her exactly what happened on November 11th. Because mind you, I kept this from people. I kept this from people
Right.
because I was ashamed of myself. I was embarrassed. I felt like the most shittiest person in this world. And it's not something I want to share with people. But because I was almost at the point of losing my children, I had to tell her the truth. And I broke down and she honestly gave me an ultimatum. Like, what are your plans? If you stay with this person, obviously this person is toxic and you're not giving your children a healthy environment. Yes, you're giving them food, you're giving them clothes, you're providing what you need to provide for them, but you're lacking the safety, the mental safety. And that moment I broke down because I just remembered my daughter. Like I was so traumatized that I couldn't even look at my daughter anymore. I just felt like I failed her and I she didn't deserve me. And I couldn't look at her without experiencing that trauma over and over again in my head. Um that was like the hardest part. And I'm glad that the worker finally was like, well, you know what, like you have a choice. It's either you work on building a safe environment mentally, not just physically but mentally for your children, and he needs to work on himself, or you guys continue this relationship, this ongoing toxic relationship, because we don't know if he's going to heal. He doesn't seem like at that time he wasn't even like, he just wasn't really cooperative. um and so it kind of left a bad taste in their mouth about him.
Yeah.
And they knew for a fact that if I continued to stay in this relationship, my children would be affected. And she told me, and if this continues, like they might be at a position where they have to take and remove the kids from our care. Jules, I broke down and I'm like, okay, no, like this, no, it's not gonna happen. If you're pretty much saying it's him or my children. And she looked at me dead in the eye and she didn't say anything. And I just knew that what she was telling me. And I was just like, okay, well then I choose my children.
Right.
I chose my children. And when people ask how I got out of it, it was because of my worker. She gave me this kind of ultimatum. And that was the moment where I started going therapy. I started understanding about self-love, self-care, boundaries. I started, putting my kids into therapy, into different counseling, just to make sure that they were okay, that they understood their feelings.
Right.
And I did this for 3 whole years, 3 to 4 years, 3 to 4 years. And mind you, because there was substance abuse within our relationship, I had to do a drug test, right?
Right.
I had my worker come in, 1 month and cut a piece of my hair just to see how much, drugs I was on. And she came back. She's like, you had nothing in here. And I knew I had nothing in there because the only reason why was that relationship made me want to do drugs, to just, kind of get away from situations. It made me want to, do things and harm my body because I didn't know I could escape from it. And the moment she told me like I was drug free, um, that, she sees such a growth in me, that, she may not be like longer around in our family, I was just like, I felt so good to be like, I think I'm coming back. Like I think the old Cindy is actually coming back. That's how I got out of that toxic situation. I worked so hard to develop that self-love.
Right.
I worked so hard to just really put myself first. I understood what it meant to put yourself first. If I was on a plane, there's a reason why they tell us to put your mask on before you put your children's masks on. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because you got to protect yourself before you can even protect other people.
Right.
I wasn't protecting myself, so how could I be possibly protecting my kids? And I really owe it to that agency that really put me to therapy. And I thank God every day that I was in therapy, because it was one of the and I boast on it. I tell people, like, listen, if you're not feeling good about yourself, you're not feeling good about your situation, it's okay to ask someone for help, right? Don't
Exactly.
ask your
Yes.
friends, don't ask your family, because they're always going to be biased. They're never going to give you they will give you that straight answer. You just don't want to hear it from them. So, go to somebody who's really, a professional, not going to be biased, but really help you understand. And one of that therapy was cognitive behavioral therapy. That
Mm-hmm.
was one of my, like, I love that therapy so much, because my counselor at that time was just like always telling me, like, if he does this, this is what you do, this is how you can respond, right? So when I would get those nasty texts that he would write that I'm a bad mom, I would get triggered. Because how dare
Right.
you tell me I'm a bad mom, and I'm here in defense mode, right? Defending my name to somebody who doesn't even care about me, really. And
Right.
it was a waste of energy. And one of the biggest tips that my counselor was like, when he does that, when he tells you you're a bad mother, why don't you look at your kids and do something that makes you a good mother? And it's just those kind of techniques that says, you know what, you're right. Instead of wasting my time and energy on defending something that's negative, I'm going to take that energy and use it towards my children who need that positive energy, who need me as their mom. And it became so habitual that every time he started texting, I was just like, there was no response. It was just like, you just left on red. You know what I
Right.
mean? And that's how I got out of my situation. And ever since, I just been doing nothing but reminding myself, that it's important to take care of yourself first, especially
Right.
mentally.
Exactly. Yes, that's very important.
Um,
Thank you so much for sharing that. It honestly takes a lot. You're such a strong woman. 7 kids as well. That's wow. I'm so super glad you got out of it. It's the best decision that you've made, even for your children as well. So how's your life now with your healing journey? Like, what are you doing now that's different?
I am putting back into the community. Well, that's what I feel like I'm doing. I have this goal in mind to really bring out, women's confidence. I, for one, have struggled with confidence for a long time, so I'm working on that right now. But the moment I do become a lot more confident with myself, this is something I want to share and bring out with other women, to bring out their goddess in them, to
Yeah.
to really make them feel alive again. And that to me, I use beauty for that, right? So my beauty bar, I love that feeling when they're like, oh my gosh, my lashes look so nice, and oh my gosh, my hair. I love doing weddings for brides. They tell me how insecure they are and all that stuff, and I make them look super glam for their wedding, and it just makes me feel good. But one of the other things was, getting out of a toxic situation. I was left broke, and I stayed broke for a very long time after, because I didn't understand my finances. And I was in and out of shelters because I didn't understand what an emergency fund was. And, it's one of the reasons why I got myself into this financial industry now. It's because now I can teach women to protect themselves in finance, especially in a situation like that, right?
Right.
And I teach people about financial education, and I've always helped people kind of understand what situation they're in. I never tell them to leave. I
Mhm.
just always tell them, like, hey, listen, you're worth more than what this person is giving you. um but it's just, I feel right now that the two industries that I'm in are going to help me help so many women become a better version of themselves every day, day in and day out. And that's just where I want to be, and where I'm staying. And I'm just like, I don't know, I just get really excited just thinking about it.
I'm,
Like
I'm
all the
getting
women
excited
that
for
like,
you.
like, oh my God, I'm gonna bring out everybody's goddess and they're gonna be like super confident and all super wealthy. And I'm like, this is so exciting. Like I'm creating a community of women that's gonna bring back their life. That's that one person took away from them. And that's where I'm at. That's what I'm excited to do. And that's where I'm like really pushing forward with what I'm doing right now. So
Yeah, no, good for you. Good for you. I believe it 100% that that's definitely going to be helpful to other women out there. So speaking of the other victims and other survivors out there right now who may be listening to your episode, what do you think is important for them to know?
I think the most important thing is to really kind of sit back and picture your life at one point without the toxicity. What will it look like for you? How would it look like for you if 5 years from now you're still in the same situation? Is that going to serve you? Right. But now let's flip that and say and tell yourself what that life is going to look like if you were to get out of that situation, right?
Right.
Most of the time we're in that situation because there's a fear of something. There was a fear of me being a single mom of four. There was a fear of me having a bad reputation. For all the survivors or anyone struggling in this situation, just really look at yourself 5 years from now and really identify where you want to be. And if that current moment is where you want to be 5 years from now, then, kudos, stay where you're at. But if you know that your life is going to look and feel better 5 years from now, like I would start working on that right now. I would start working on, self-love. I would start looking for books on motivation and confidence, and surround yourself with like positive people. I think that was the biggest thing, was surrounding myself with positive people. I started to reconnect with people I haven't talked to in a long time because at one point in our life, they made me feel good.
Right.
So I reached out to them. I'm like, hey, how are you? Right. But before I could even do that, I had to build confidence. I had to build that self-love with me first. And it was just a matter of like journaling my thoughts. I wrote down all the time. I wrote down everything, how I was feeling. And what I did consistently was what I wanted my life to look like in 5 years.
Yeah, that's definitely helpful, especially when you're kind of expressing everything on a journal. It's like you're pulling some of the weight off your shoulder. It's like you're able to let it out, kind of thing. And hopefully, this interview today with me, it'll be helpful. Like it'll be for the better.
Yeah, actually, I was kind of like nervous doing this. I'm like, I'm gonna cry. That's the one thing I hate is crying. But it's a human emotion, so you just got to feel it sometimes, right? But yeah, I just, my biggest thing is that everything we experience in life is either a blessing or a lesson.
Yes.
Right. I took what happened to me as a lesson, and it became a blessing, because honestly, if that didn't happen to me, I probably would have been in the same cycle of abuse in another relationship. Right. I was in a constant, what do you call it? Normalcy. This is normal to me. You know what I mean? And now I'm in a healthy relationship. Like I have a person in my life who works with me. He works with me. Not against me. We're raising our kids together, and he's been a stepdad to 4 kids that came from a toxic relationship. He has to deal with their trauma too. And sometimes he had to deal with my trauma, right? And to just have this person understand, me, and he knows that I'm working to become a better person, and it's helping him become a better person as well. And we're just that kind of partner now that just thrives in a very healthy environment. And this is what my kids get to see. This is what love looks like. This is what 2 people respecting each other looks like. Yes, we get into arguments, but it's adult arguments. It's normal arguments. Our bills need to be paid. Like, how are you getting paid? Right? The house needs to be clean. How, like, come on, guys, like, let's get this cleaning, right? Like these adult conversations, these are important things that we need to talk about, right? Not like who's cheating on who, right? I don't want to ever have that conversation in front of my children, right? I don't ever want to disrespect the partner I'm with, thinking that he's with somebody else, right? Like I don't, it just doesn't make sense to be with somebody I don't trust, right? Because that
Right.
just creates an unhealthy environment for my kids. And now I'm now going to like develop trust issues with my kids, right?
Right.
So, you know, I'm just glad that now I'm in an environment where not only am I thriving, but my kids are thriving. And that was my biggest goal, just to make sure like whatever happened between me and their dad will never happen again.
I'm so happy for you. And then you have your partner that you're with right now, very supportive, and you guys support each other. So that's amazing. I'm very happy for you.
Thank you. Yeah, I know he's great. He's like, honestly, he needs to have his own reward right now. He's been a great dad. He's such a great dad.
That's
My kids
amazing.
love him so much. So it's different. It's a different environment. It's crazy. It's crazy to think that I was at that position, you know, 8 years ago, 9 years ago. And I just want, you know, people to hear my story so they have hope that their situation is just a temporary situation, and that their circumstances, it's not who they are, right? Their circumstances don't define them. So there's always that opportunity for growth. There's always that opportunity to learn to become the better version of yourself. Whatever happened to you, right? Whatever is going on with you, you can change that. We all have that ability to change and design our life. We're the architect of our life, right? So it's just a matter of getting yourself in front of your future. Like you just need to put your mind where your future needs to be. And the more you think of that, the more you envision that for yourself, like you're going to have, you know, that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Like I guarantee it. But yeah, it really starts with yourself. It really starts with your mindset. So
It really does.
yeah, that's I don't know how to explain things, but yeah, that's my life story.
Sounds like a whole roller coaster. You've been through so much and you made it out. You survived. I'm so happy for you. And now you're in a healthy environment too for you and your children. Amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. It took a lot. So
No, I 100% I believe that.
oh yeah, it took a lot. And it was an easy thing. So if anybody thinks this journey was easy, it's not, but it is possible. And that's what I want everyone to think, that they have the possibility to be wherever they want to be.
But they gotta be the ones putting in the work though.
Exactly.
All right. And yeah, just to wrap it up a bit, do you have any social media that you'd like to share with the listeners, or your beauty bar link that if you have one?
Yeah, great. Yeah, I do. My Instagram is Cindy Baby. I post everything motherhood, as well as posting a lot more beauty and more financial education soon. Because I just really want somebody to be super educated with their finances, to really avoid. That's my secret sauce right now. Hey, it's if you guys are ever in this situation, at least build your fund, right? So you can get out of that. But yeah, I'm going to be throwing in a lot of financial tips, a lot of beauty tips, and a lot of motherhood stuff. Like I just love sharing my children. So
Awesome.
and oh yeah, and my beauty bar is called Kina Iya Beauty.
I'll add that in the bio under this podcast. If you can just send that to me, and then I can add it in there.
I will do that.
All right. Well, I really want to thank you, Cindy, for sharing your story today. I'm not sure. Do you have any questions for me, or?
No, I'm good.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for meeting with me today and making this possible.
Thank you so much, Jules. Thank you for this opportunity. All right. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.